Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Glad to have you out on this first Sunday of May. Trust that you're enjoying this beautiful day, and if you haven't been outside yet today, I hope you get outside and enjoy the beauty that's around us. A few announcements before we get into our actual service. I want to remind you that we send out a worship liturgy. It's our way of putting into your hands the outline of the service so that you're able to participate in all that is going on here. In our announcements for this week, I want to tell you that this past Wednesday night we had a Zoom dialogue with Joshua Pipoli and Jenny Fetzer on navigating cultural and global grief. That has been uploaded to our YouTube channel, so if you would like to look at that, it's very informative on all the different things that we experience. And in fact, we're going to see a little bit of that in our time here today in our scripture out of Lamentations chapter 2. Also, we are going to begin again our Wednesday night Bible study, obviously not in person, but we're going to use the Zoom platform to do that on Wednesday nights from 7 to 8 o'clock. If you're on our email list, you are receiving an invitation and a password for that. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the book of Lamentations. I don't have time on Sunday morning to kind of tease out some of the themes that are there. So for the next several weeks, we're going to be doing a subject called Teardrops, and it's going to look at some of the themes that are in the book of Lamentations. So join us this coming Wednesday night. And if you would like to be a part of that Bible study, you can email me. I'll send you the invitation that has the password to get in. My email address is larry.posa@gmail.com. Also, I want to remind you that next Sunday, we are going to be taking communion, so make sure you have your juice and your bread available as we do the online worship. How long are we going to be doing the online worship? We've been talking as a general board on a weekly basis, and we concluded this past week that we're going to do all our services in May online. Our goal is to start back up in person again on the first Sunday of June the 7th. And unless we're told otherwise by the governor or whatever, that's what we're going to move to. We're going to put pieces in place so that as you come back into worship, we're going to provide the things that are needed to keep you safe, sanitizer, that type of thing. If you have a mask, we're going to ask, at least for the first several weeks, that you bring that with you as well. We'll remind you of this on a weekly basis, but I just want to get it into your thought process beginning today. So I think I've covered all the announcements. The way I'd like to begin our service today, we're going to be looking at Lamentations chapter 2. And many times when I wake up in the morning and I'm lying in bed, there are certain things that kind of pass through my head. And as I was thinking about the message I'm going to give to you in a few moments, I began thinking about this particular lead-in to our service. And I just want to read it to you. I got up, I wrote it down, I typed it out. If you'd like to have a copy of it, I can be more than happy to give it to you. I did upload it to our Facebook page, not our Facebook page, our website, shadetreecc.org. If you look under blog, Larry's blog, it is there. Let me read it, and then we will begin to worship together. There are certain times when we will face something of deep mystery and profound misery. Such was the experience of those who lived during the fall of Jerusalem in 587 BC. In the book of Lamentations, we find a poet, a personified city, and behind the scenes, we find God. All three interact in a genre called lament. In the book, we find the author struggling out loud as he wrestles with the mystery and misery of his life. In Lamentations 2:13, the poet looks at the personified city of Jerusalem, saying, "Your wound is as deep as the sea." Look out on a summer evening at the sky. You can see the moon and perhaps some of the stars. You have not explored the deeper mystery of the universe without the help of a telescope, though. Looking through a different lens helps to explore the mystery of deep space. Listen to the waves of the ocean. The soothing rhythm of the water hitting the shore can be an existential experience. but the depths of the sea cannot be fathomed without the aid of scuba gear or sonic equipment. Hidden below the surface are creatures and coral and colors that are unique only to the deep sea. Learning is a part of life. There is never a time when we stop discovering new and profound truths about anthropology, biology, astronomy, and theology too. Each day presents new opportunities to embrace a deeper knowledge. Lament is an expression of the human soul that goes deeper than we can imagine. It is as mysterious as deep space, and it is as vast as the deep sea. The sorrow inside the soul is as close as our next breath. And what will we do with it? Will we let it sit dormant? Will we surrender to it? Will we sound it out? We must let it out through human creativity such as prose and poetry, art, music, photography, and a participation through rituals and religion and relationships. Looking, listening, learning, and lamenting are all a part of the human experience. It makes us who we are and who we are becoming. Let's worship together.
Let's start with a reading from Lamentations 2, 15 through 19. Call out to the Lord, you wall of Lady Zion. Let your tears run down like a torrent night and day. Grant yourself no respite, the pupil of your eyes no pause. Get up, shout out during the night, from the start of the night watches. Pour out what is on your heart in the presence of the Lord himself. And now a call to lament by Anne Weems. We are the ones who cry in the night, whose heart pounds, whose stomachs knot, whose heads split in pain. My blood pressure climbs, and I have aches and pains that have no cause except my broken heart. One day you were here, O God, and then you disappeared, like a magician doing tricks on a stage. One day we were talking, and suddenly you turned silent, and I spoke only to the wind. Have you gone so far away my voice can no longer reach you? Surely you're not rejecting me when I am so desolated. Surely you remember that I've always belonged to you. When I was a child, I flew into your arms and settled there. I had no secrets from you. Now, like a baby abandoned on a doorstep, I have awakened in a strange place where you do not live. This is a godless land, and I do not want to be here. Please reappear, O God, and listen for my prayers. And when you hear me, your compassion will fly on the wind, and you will remember your own, and I will leave the horror that I've lived in, and my feet will walk next to yours once more.
Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Who am I that the highest king would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the Son sets free. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Free at last, he has ransomed me. His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the Son sets free. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. My Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Another Lament, A Time to Question and Wait, by Anne Weems. God, find me here, where the sun is afraid to shine. Don't you recognize your faithful one? Haven't I sung your songs in the ears of your enemies? Why then are you silent? Why have you forsaken me and let me to wail in the empty night? Why do you give me silence when I ask for the nightingale's song? O God, have pity on me and enter into the city of my pain. Hear my cry and come to me that all might know your faithfulness. From the icy coldness of the pit, I will praise your name, for like a shepherd searching for a lost sheep, you will not give up until you find me. I wait for the light of your coming. Then I will shout that my God is the God who does not rest until all are gathered in from the threat of the night. You call me out upon the waters, the great unknown, where feet may fail. And there I find you in the mystery, in oceans deep, my faith will stand. And I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. I am yours, and you are mine. Your grace abounds in deepest waters. Your sovereign hand will be my guide. Where feet may fail and fear surrounds me, you've never failed and you won't start now. And I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. I am yours, and you are mine. You are Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander. My faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. and keep my eyes above the waves. My soul will rest in your embrace. I am yours, and you are mine.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Jen. Appreciate you coming out and leading us in worship online every week. And thank you, Tom, for being behind the camera there for us. On your worship liturgy, you'll find a very short outline of where I want to go in chapter 2 of the book of Lamentations on page 7. This is a passage that is lengthy, and it reminds us of what was introduced in chapter 1. Lament is like an art form we must practice if we are to find value in it. If we refuse to lament, we probably will not learn, and consequently, we will not benefit from it. Honest spirituality is a rare occasion in church. Healthy spirituality is always honest about our experiences, but many times in the church, there's not the permission to do that. Many people are afraid to voice their questions, their doubts, and even their anger toward God. It's interesting to me that cultures and institutions and religions reinforce a certain code that of what you're allowed to express and what you're not allowed to express. We learn very quickly in church many times because there's always somebody there to correct us if we say the wrong thing at the wrong time. Sometimes our feelings become a threat toward other people, and as a result, we bury a lot of stuff deep down inside of us. That's why the book of Lamentations is a gift to us as human beings. It tells us to get it out. Chapter 1 gives us the setting of what is going on. This city of Jerusalem, this fair maiden, the Lady Zion, as referred to in the poems, is invaded by the king of Babylon. And what we find is that the poet looks upon the ruin that is left and is filled with grief. Now, chapter 2 takes an interesting turn. In chapter 1, it's almost as if the author is saying it's all the inhabitants of Jerusalem's fault. They deserve what's coming to them. But in chapter 2, after the poet observes all that is going on with the chosen community of Israel, what we find taking place at that point is it's too much for him. It's so overwhelming to him that he begins to redirect his focus from Lady Zion to actually God. And he begins to question God as to why God would do the type of things that's recorded here in this particular chapter. What we see taking place in this particular chapter is that it's as if God has hurled Jerusalem down to the ground. It's as if he swallowed her up. It's as if the wound becomes as deep as the sea. So what we see taking place here is in chapter 2, there is a rough riding of the waves of suffering that are going on. You notice all kinds of picturesque words in this chapter. And that's because there is this personification of a city, Jerusalem, and it begins to say, how could you let this covenant city down, God? Listen, verse 1 says, how the Lord has covered daughter Zion with the cloud of his anger. He has hurled down the splendor of Israel from heaven to earth. He has not remembered his footstool in the day of his anger. Without pity, the Lord has swallowed up all the dwellings of Jacob. In his wrath, he has torn down the strongholds of daughter Judah. He has brought down her kingdom and princes to the ground in dishonor. You can see all of this is raging inside the heart of the poet. This chapter, again, is an acrostic. It uses all 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. But what it does is it accelerates what's going on inside the soul of the author. And the emphasis here is on the culpability of God. It's almost as if this writer is pointing his finger into the face of God and saying, how could you let this happen to your people? It's parallel to what Jeremiah does. It's parallel to what Job does and other books of the Old Testament. But I think what is behind all of this in chapter 2 of Lamentations is the question, does she really deserve all this? Is this a really over-the-top expression of God to allow a foreign power to come in and to take her captive? What we see is the author's confronting God. And that's part of the genre of Lamentations. We see the psalmist do that as well. And it begins with, how could you let this happen? And the emotions are laid out before us. It says down in verse 4, like an enemy, he has strung his bow, and his right hand is ready. Like a foe, he has slain all who were pleasing to the eye. He has poured out his wrath like fire on the tent of daughter Zion. And it just goes on like this in the first part of the chapter. You see this visceral recounting in verses 1 through 10 of God's vengeance upon the city of Jerusalem. Such strong language is taking place. But the author now is no longer blaming the city, no longer blaming the inhabitants. Rather, the narrator is almost suggesting as if this is kind of like a domestic violence situation. And Zion, this special city all through the Old Testament, is the victim in all of this. God takes up his bow. God has become her enemy. God spurs the king. God rejects the altar. All of this is in this chapter, and you go, oh my goodness gracious, this is so down and depressing type of chapter. No, what it's doing is it's illustrating for us that these feelings that we have down inside of us need to come out. Otherwise, the bitter root is going to take place. And as it takes hold of us and the tentacles of the anger that is deep down inside of us, one of the things that happens is we begin to go into all kinds of different expressions that because we're going through grief. That's what Joshua and Jenny were talking about on Wednesday night, is some of the effects of grief and what it takes, how it takes its toll on the human soul. And so what we see taking place here is this poetic voice that mourns the fate of the people. Down in verse 11 and 12, we see that the author says, as my eyes fail from weeping, I'm in torment within. My heart is poured out on the ground because my people are destroyed, because children and infants faint in the streets of the city. There's this mourning that is going on. And what we find taking place is the expression, the release of everything turning bad. Here we are in the midst of this pandemic, and we don't experience nearly what Jerusalem is experiencing here, but what we are experiencing is grief. What we are experiencing are numbness and anger and all the type of things, maybe even guilt to a certain extent. And what we see taking place in this chapter is the releasing of those emotions. The big vision that I see in this chapter is found down in verse 13 when he says, your wound is as deep as the sea. Some translation says as vast as the sea. Who is it that can heal you? In other words, is comfort an impossibility at this point? Now think about the sea for a moment. You stand on the edge of the ocean, And you look out, and the vast sea can travel across the channel to England or other parts of the world. But down below it is also very deep forms of life that are taking place. The sea is a good illustration of our soul. Many of the things that take place out on the horizon or deep down inside of our soul are wounds many times that we carry around inside of us, many times for many, many years. And it begins to swallow us up. It begins to eat us alive. And so in this chapter, the observer, the narrator is saying, your wound is as deep as the sea. Who is it that can heal you? Now, is this a rhetorical question, or has he come to the end of his rope? Is he really questioning whether or not someone could bring him comfort, someone can bring him hope? The text continues on, and what we find taking place is that there's a doubt that it could ever come back from where it was. In verse 15, it says, all who pass your way clap their hands at you. They scoff, they shake their heads at daughter Jerusalem. And they say, is this the city that was called the perfection of beauty, the joy of the whole earth? Is this really God's chosen place? So at this point, there's doubt. At this point, there's despair. At this point, there's accusation against God. At this point, there is anger toward God. At this point, there's all of these things that are going on, and there is a wonder inside the heart of the narrator here as he observes this city, whether she's able to rebound, whether she'll be able to recapture the hope and the glory and the majesty that she once was. Are you at that point in your life? Not just because of this pandemic, but have you had so many wounds kind of build up inside of you that you're almost to the point of despair, like the writer here of Lamentations? So what are we to do? Well, in the very end of the chapter, it's interesting. It kind of redirects the focus, and the city of Jerusalem and her inhabitants are implored to cry out to the Lord. Verse 18 says, the hearts of the people cry out to the Lord. Your walls of daughter Zion, you walls of daughter Zion, let your tears flow like a river, day and night. Give yourself no relief, your eyes no rest. In other words, keep calling out to God. Keep pouring it out. Don't allow it to build up. Don't allow it to be buried. Verse 19, arise, cry out in the night as the watches of the night begin. Pour out your heart like water in the presence of the Lord. Lift up your hands to him for the lives of your children who faint from hunger at every street corner. Where is God in all of this? We often ask that question, don't we? And yet, while God seems to be absent, the writer of Scripture implores us to continue to cry out to God, not to let it build up inside of us. God can take it. So whether it's anger or frustration, or whether it's a plea for God to show up, in the midst of our eyes being filled with tears and our gut-wrenching, call out to God. Continue to call out to God, because it is there that he will come to his people. It might not be at the time that we want it to be. It might not be at the time we need it to be. But God has not given up on us. And what we find is in chapter 3, there will be a verse that you know out of the book of Lamentations. His mercies are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness, Lord, unto me. And so what we find taking place in this chapter is almost a setup to chapter 3, because the narrator is using a comparison. There are times in our life when our suffering feels as vast as the sea or as deep as the ocean. And so I wrote this little thing that's in your notes there. Darker than the ocean, as vast as the sea, my suffering goes deeper, deeper than you see. Nothing is ever like what it seems. We walk around church, we walk around our workplace with maybe a joyful or attitude or a smile on our face, but that's not how we really feel. We have a tendency to put on a mask, don't we? We have a tendency not to just say, hey, this is the way it is. This is how I'm really feeling. And yet it is so needed. It's needed within the church. It's needed within our families. It's needed wherever we can have trusted friends to say, this is how I'm really feeling. This is where I'm frustrated. This is where God is disappointing me, if there is a God. Maybe you've gotten even to that point at some point. And so we need to have that openness and honesty with other people, within trusted circles of friendships, to be able to just be honest, because it will destroy us from the inside out if we just can't let it out. And that's what this chapter is illustrating for us. In the midst of the uncontrollable, in the midst of the chaotic, in the midst of all that is going on inside of us, the psalmists tell us, cry out to the Lord. The poet in Lamentations says to cry out to the Lord, even if it's in anger, even if it's in a sense of betrayal that God has let us down, because it's therapeutic. It's something that will heal us in the long term. And so we come to the end of this chapter. I have not done it justice by any means. But what we do understand in all of this is this writer, this poet is being honest to God. He's being honest to God. So what do we do with this chapter? I think it helps to know that we all go through different stages of grief in our life, numbness and denial and anger and blame and all these other things. But to lament is to refuse to be silent and to let it simmer in the soul. To lament is to open up the rib cage and let it out. To lament is to step into an honest and authentic spirituality. There is a quote that came from Joshua Wednesday night. It's in your notes here. It comes from Viktor Frankl. And he says, an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. Let me say that again. An abnormal reaction, ways that you don't normally respond to an abnormal situation, the things that are not what we usually experience, is normal behavior. In other words, what we find taking place in the midst of our soul is that when we come up against that which is abnormal, when we come up against that which is significantly profound upon us and hits us between the eyes, you're going to act out. You're going to be angry. You're going to feel guilty. All of that is normal. Don't let a Christian come along and tell you it's not normal. Don't let them tell you, put a smile on your face and just pretend that you're happy. I've often heard it said in the course of my lifetime that you have to fake it till you make it. No. That's not what's illustrated in this. The writer of Lamentations, the poet, the narrator, is telling us, let it out. Ray Scurfield, a professor of social work at University of Southern Mississippi, says these are the type of actions that are normal in grief. Immersion in media coverage, avoidance or minimalization, the task or activity-oriented tunnel vision, the resurgence of memory, inappropriate behavior and attitudes, hyperactivity and intolerance, a preoccupation with what has happened or what might happen. There's a marked emotions that take place and all of that. And he also gives some strategies for coping. Get back to everyday routines. Remember what worked before in your life and tap into it. Reassess your priorities and ask questions like, what lesson have I learned through all of this? And I might just suggest, write it out, sing it out. Whatever it is, get it out. It is not well with my soul. We sing that hymn. It is not always well with our soul, but we continue to try. We continue to persevere. Nobody can give you an instruction manual for grief. It is a mix of emotions as deep as the sea. It's as vast as the ocean. And we just have to deal with it one emotion at a time. And as we do so, all of us will lament in our own ways, in our own timing. But to get it out to friends, to get it out to family, to get it out to church helps in the process. And I think that's what I take away from chapter 2 of the book of Lamentations. We close our service here this morning with a benediction that is found in your worship liturgy. Eternal God, in whose perfect kingdom no sword is drawn, but the sword of righteousness. No strength is known, but the strength of love. So mightily spread abroad your spirit, that all peoples may be gathered under the banner of the Prince of Peace, and as children of one Father, to whom be dominion and glory now and forever. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and may he lift up his countenance upon you. May he pour his grace into your soul, and may he give you strength for the week ahead. We hope to see you on Wednesday night in the Zoom Bible study, and until we come online again, may God richly bless you. Grace and peace, everyone.